Hey y'all, welcome back to the Farmer's Table. My name is Jess. I'm glad to have you here with me today, where I'm going to be sharing a recipe for a great creamy tomato soup from scratch. Now it's winter time right now. It's soup season. There's nothing like a great bowl of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich. That's my kid's favorite way to eat it for sure. Now I grew up on the canned tomato soup. I like a tomato soup that is a little creamy and a little on the sweet side. And the first time I ever made tomato soup from scratch, I was a little dumbfounded at how absolutely simple and very, very delicious it is. So I don't often make tomato soup in the summer. To be completely frank, when it's 100 degrees outside, I don't really want to eat a warm bowl of soup necessarily. I occasionally will do soups and stuff, but usually tomato is not the top of the priority list. So I am making this from canned tomatoes that came from the summer garden. I've got a small Dutch oven here. I'm going to put over medium heat. Any heavy bottom pot works fine for this, but I use cast iron just because that's what I've got. I'm going to put about 2 tablespoons of butter in here to begin that melting, and I'm gonna go ahead and dice up an onion. Now I am going to use an immersion blender on this soup when I get to the end. You don't have to do that. This is a preference thing. If you want some texture in your soup, you don't have to blend it up. If you like a nice smooth tomato soup, you would want to. Now that may affect how you want to cut these onions. If you're planning on not blending it, you may want to dice these a little bit smaller. I'm just going to do kind of a rough chop because I know that it is going to get blended in the end. I'm going to let those onions cook down for about 15 to 20 minutes. I don't want them fully caramelized, but I do want that process to start. If you're trying to make this in a pinch, you're just trying to make a quick lunch, you can always just sweat the onions for like 5 minutes and move on and put like a tablespoon of sugar in. I like to let the onions caramelize a little bit because that sweet onion is going to taste really sweet after that happens, and then I don't put any sugar in the soup. But if I've got the time, this is the way I prefer to do it. Now I'm going to chop up 4 cloves of garlic. I don't want to put these in the beginning with the onions because garlic will burn, whereas the onions will caramelize, so I'm going to wait for that 15 minutes to pass, and then I'll throw this garlic in and give it a minute or 2 to saute so it can become aromatic before we move on to the next step. Alright, so this is kind of what I was looking for in my onions. I want to see some browning and some texture and that they're getting soft. Just turn the heat down a little bit so it's on medium-low. Now I'm going to add in the garlic. And I'm just going to give that a couple of minutes. Alright, real quick on the tomatoes that you're going to use. I am going to use a jar of tomatoes that were canned over the summer. This is a great way to use your canned tomatoes to make a quick meal with them, where they get to really be the star of the meal. If you're going with store-bought, if you don't have home canned ones, now this is a quart jar, so that's 32 ounces. If you're going with store-bought, the big can of store-bought tomatoes is like 28 ounces. It's fine. You can use that. You can use 2 14-ounce cans. Roughly, this recipe needs about a quart of tomatoes, about a pint of chicken broth, or beef broth, or vegetable broth, or whatever broth you want to use. Don't let this get fussy. Don't let this get complicated. That 4-ounce discrepancy of tomatoes is not going to make that big of a difference. It's still going to be a lovely soup. Food from scratch doesn't have to be fussy. It doesn't have to be exact. It's not an exact science at all. It'll all taste pretty good. Now these are whole tomatoes in sauce. And you can use crushed, diced, whatever it is you have. The only difference that it's going to make is that you'll obviously have to blend it at the end if you use whole tomatoes like these. If you use crushed ones or soft ones, you might not have to. So I'm pouring in the tomatoes, the broth. I've got a tablespoon of dried oregano and a tablespoon of dried basil. And I'm going to go ahead and add that in. If you like a sweeter soup, you could put a tablespoon of sugar or honey in at this point. For me, caramelizing the onions does the trick. I don't really feel like it needs that. If you do not like your food as herby, you could cut those tablespoons in half and do half of each. I like food with a lot of herbs in it, and so I like going with a full tablespoon of each. And if you want to use fresh herbs, if you have those. Also, if you like some spice at this point, you can put a teaspoon of red pepper flakes and half a teaspoon of smoked paprika. It's a completely different flavor profile. I like it a lot, but it also just depends who I'm serving this to. If you're trying to do like a more traditional basic, similar to the canned tomato soup, you would want to do less herbs, more sugar, because that's what that is like. If that's the tomato soup you know and love and you're trying to do that from scratch. However, if you want to get adventurous, I like the paprika and red pepper flakes. I think it's really good. One thing you will never see me do is tell you how much salt and pepper to put in your food, because I don't know you like that. I'm Southern. We salt our food a lot. Just how it is. And when I first started sharing content online, I would have such mixed reviews. I would have people being like, that is way too much salt. And for some people that may be the case, but listen, I've said it before, I'll say it again, we measure salt with our heart in this house, and I just can't tell you how much salt and pepper to put in your food. However much you decide, now's the time to go ahead and put it in. Okay, there we have it. At this stage, our lovely soup before it's blended. Now this is gonna simmer for about 10 minutes. Time's up, heat's going off. At this point, we have tomato soup. You can choose to eat it as it is. I'm going to blend mine because I did use really big chunks of tomatoes. I just used the immersion blender right here in the pot. However, this recipe is for creamy tomato soup. So there's one more thing I'm gonna add here. I'm gonna put in 4 ounces of heavy cream. Now, if you don't do dairy, which I'm actually making this for Maya, and that's why I'm using the heavy cream. All right, try to show you guys the texture here. If you don't do dairy, I have found the best dairy alternative for this soup is to use canned coconut cream. That gives really the best texture. Now you could do anything. If you don't have heavy cream, you have half and half, you could do that instead. It's just not gonna be as rich. You could even just do milk. If I were doing milk, I would probably do a little more than 4 ounces. I might go for like a whole cup of milk, which is gonna dilute the soup a little bit, but it'll be fine. And if all you have in your fridge is like almond milk or something like that, you can use that. You're just not gonna get as creamy of a texture, and that's fine. If you're looking for like a truly creamy texture from a non-dairy alternative, canned coconut cream is my favorite. So there is our tomato soup. Great with a grilled cheese or on its own. You can always toast some croutons and throw it on top of here if you want some more texture in it. But this is a great, fast, real food recipe that you don't have to remember to thaw anything. And it is definitely a heartwarming thing that gives you a little bit of your summer tomatoes in the middle of the winter. As always, the printable recipe is in the show notes. Thank you for hanging out with me today. I bless you. Until next time.